Friends, it's great to be back in Glasgow this morning. A proud city, a welcoming city, an SNP city. We're here today to talk about Scotland's future. Every time I go out on the road, I'm struck by how much we have going for us as a country. So many strengths, so much innovation. We are truly blessed to call Scotland home. In the 2 years since becoming First Minister, I've dedicated every single day to improving the lives of the people of Scotland. When I took office, I promised I would deliver for Scotland. Falling waiting times, more operations, GP walk-in clinics, frozen rail fares, peak rail fares abolished, child poverty down and winter fuel payments restored. Friends, I keep my promises. That is my record. It's a record I'm proud to take to the people of Scotland. But make no mistake about it, I am only just getting started. At the outset of my comments today, I want to be clear that a vote for the SNP on the 7th of May is a vote to put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. For a referendum on independence, where Scotland can make our enormous wealth work for our people. A referendum where bringing down people's energy bills will be on the ballot. A referendum that will allow Scotland to reclaim our place at the heart of Europe, and a referendum that I intend to win. Today, I'm delighted to publish the SNP's election manifesto. It's called On Scotland's Side, because that is who we are and how we act. The SNP is Scotland's national party. Rural, urban, north, south, east, west, island, mainland. This is a manifesto for every part of Scotland. While others in this election seek to divide communities, to target minorities and talk our country down, this is a manifesto that brings people together and unashamedly talks Scotland up. A manifesto for all of Scotland. That's what you get if you vote SNP on the 7th of May, a government on Scotland's side and a First Minister that will always put Scotland first. Friends, I know that times are tough out there. Food prices have shot up, household bills are soaring, and filling the tank now empties your pocket. In energy-rich Scotland, people can't afford to heat their homes. In a country with more renewable power than we use, our bills are soaring. And in a country where oil and gas has sent £350 billion to Westminster, a Labour government tried to rob our pensioners of their heating allowance. Friends, the problem is not that we don't have the energy. The problem is that Westminster has the power. This election is our opportunity to take those powers and put them into Scotland's hands. Lower bills, more jobs, a greener future. That's what you get when you vote SNP on the 7th of May. The cost of living is the defining issue of this election, and it defines the SNP's plans for Scotland. But friends, this cost of living crisis and Westminster's complete failure to get a grip on it demands that we do everything we can. In recent weeks, we've been setting out some of the bold and ambitious measures a re-elected SNP government will introduce. For people trying to buy their first home, we'll help you onto the property ladder with £10,000 towards your deposit. For private renters, the right of first refusal to buy your home if it goes on sale. For parents, we'll intensify Scotland's childcare revolution, extending support over the next Parliament to every child in the country, from 9 months old to the end of primary school all year round. And we'll build on the success of the baby box with a new Welcome to School bag. Friends, concessionary travel has been one of the great success stories of the SNP's time in office, and we're going to protect the existing schemes that we have in place. But in this cost of living crisis, as we face a climate emergency, it's time to go further and be bolder. People need to be able to afford to get to their work, to go out and to see friends, to get out and about. The cost of travelling from Hamilton, for example, to get here today by bus would cost more than £7. From Paisley, it would cost £6. From Dumbarton, it would cost £9.30. These costs are too high. So I can announce today that if re-elected, an SNP government will cap bus fares at £2 in every part of Scotland. Cheaper travel. Cheaper travel and more money in your pocket. That's what you get with a government on Scotland's side. That's what you get by voting SNP on the 7th of May. Friends, the cost of living is hammering people, no more so than when they get to the supermarket till. Inflation has come down, but prices have not. People are quite simply struggling to afford food. In a rich country like Scotland, that is a proper moral outrage. For some, the cost of food is so high, it is hitting their health and well-being. Now, with the current powers of our Parliament, I cannot normally set prices at the till. But things have got so tough, it is now impacting on our nation's nutrition. That is a public health issue, and I have public health powers. So I can announce today that if re-elected, your SNP government will use our public health powers to set a maximum price for essential food items, reducing the price of the weekly shop, putting more money in people's pockets. Bread, milk, cheese, eggs, rice, chicken, everyday items that make up a decent diet, necessities that no one should ever have beyond their means. That's what you get with a government on Scotland's side. That's what you get by voting SNP on the 7th of May. Friends, the National Health Service is our most important public service. We have a plan to make our NHS fit for the future with 3 parts: investment, protection and renewal. Investment that will see every penny of NHS resource consequentials going to health and care. Investment that will deliver a real terms increase in health and care spending. Protection of the NHS principles of comprehensive, universal and free at the point of need. And mark my words, never, ever selling patient data to dodgy billionaires and the palanters of this world. And renewal. That means changing how the NHS works. Refocusing resources on keeping people out of hospital, shifting the balance of care. It means, for instance, giving people heart and lung MOTs in community settings across Scotland. And of course, action to end the ATM rush for GP appointments as we continue to roll out GP walk-in clinics. That's what you get when you vote SNP on the 7th of May, a government that is always on the side of Scotland's National Health Service. Friends, we have a duty to properly fund our National Health Service and all our public services, and we do. Delivering on that duty starts by growing the economy. Growth pays for the services we need and builds the Scotland we all want. So I make this pledge to you today. My government, your SNP government, will put growing our economy, getting people into work and building our national prosperity at its very heart. We're not just competing within the UK for investment. With the SNP, Scotland competes internationally for investment. We know that international events, inflation and the drag of being part of the UK is likely to hit the economy, so we must respond by hitting the accelerator. If we're re-elected, we will create a major projects office to cut through bureaucracy and speed up investment in nationally significant projects. It will get decisions taken quickly and make sure Scotland grabs the critical investment opportunities out there. To make Scotland the best place in Europe to start and scale up a business, we will establish a high growth unit to identify fast growth businesses and give them the wraparound support they need to succeed. And to help every business grow the length and breadth of the country, we will reform the planning system, speeding up decision-making. Friends, Scotland has massive opportunities in industries like energy and tech, world-class colleges and universities, and a highly skilled workforce. I want to use every single lever available to the Scottish Government to boost economic growth, support innovation and attract investment. That's what you get by voting SNP on the 7th of May, a country with a government focused on jobs, growth and success. So this is our offer to the people of Scotland. Growth at the heart of government, action on the climate, a determination to eradicate child poverty, a cost of living package unrivalled anywhere in the UK, new help for first-time buyers, a massive expansion in childcare, a nationwide £2 bus fare cap, fair food prices, shorter waiting times, more appointments and operations, and walk-in GP clinics on high streets across Scotland open 7 days a week. That's what you get when you vote SNP on the 7th of May. But more than that, a re-elected SNP government will deliver 150,000 apprenticeships, a teacher jobs guarantee, and mobile phones banned in the classroom, investment to improve our roads and fix potholes, a 25% increase in our international development funding, more support for start-ups and scale-up businesses, a £75 million housing fund for our rural and island communities, a vape display ban, a private jet tax, a mansion tax, and the proceeds of ScotWind invested in Scotland's very own wealth fund. That is what you get when you vote SNP on the 7th of May. Friends, this is the policy prospectus that the SNP offers the people of Scotland. But I offer more than that. My entire adult life has been spent in the service of this country. I have given that calling my everything. Today, I offer to do more, to serve more, to use all I have learned in leadership to secure the best future for Scotland. These are troubling and uncertain times. The world is riven by conflict. More than 20 years ago, I marched in this city against Labour's illegal war in Iraq. I marched for international law and for the principles of peace and democracy. 20 years later, I stand by those principles. I stand against despots and dictators. I stand against nuclear weapons that have no place on our shores and make us all less safe. I stand for international justice and for Scotland raising her voice for those who do not have one. At this moment, Scotland needs experienced, principled, reliable leadership in the highest office in the land, and that is what I offer this country. In this election, I'm asking people to give me the mandate to act always with and for the people who live here. When I became First Minister, I promised to serve all the people of Scotland. I reaffirm that promise today and commit to creating the best future I can for our country. The best future I can with the powers we have right now, stretching them, as I've demonstrated today, to their very limit, but working to build the very best for Scotland with the powers of independence. And that is why my call at this election is for us all to unite. Unite to secure the powers we need. Unite to make Scotland's voice heard. Unite to win a referendum on independence. We won a majority in 2011 and we can do it again. On May the 7th, use your first vote for an SNP government that will deliver more cost of living support, a stronger NHS and a stronger economy. But it is by trusting us also with your second vote that the SNP can win a majority that will secure a referendum that we will win. On the 7th of May, vote SNP for a government on Scotland's side. Vote SNP for the trusted, experienced leadership that I offer as First Minister. Vote SNP for bold action on the cost of living and on our health service. Vote SNP for hope over despair. And vote SNP to give Scotland a fresh start with independence. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, folks, I'm going to take some questions from the media, and I'm going to do some broadcast bids later on, so the broadcasters are not generally on this list, but we'll work our way through them. It'll take me a wee bit of time because there's a lot of journalists with questions today, but I'll deal with them all as they come. So, first of all, can I come to Craig Payton from PA? Craig.
Thanks. Oh, hello? Yes. Thanks, First Minister. You've made a fairly comprehensive pledges on income tax in your manifesto. You've said that you want to simplify the system by the end of the Parliament, but you've also committed to not increasing the number of bands or their rates. Does that mean you're going to be cutting bands at the bottom end? We have a 19, 20 and 21% tax rate. Are we going to see those cut? And also, you've pledged to substantially reduce the number of public bodies. What public bodies will you plan to get rid of, and how many people in that process will lose their jobs?
Well, I think on that point, Craig, we'll work through a whole series of changes as we set out in the Public Service Reform Strategy last summer to reduce the number of public bodies, and as a consequence of that, there will be a reduction in the number of public servants who are working in the public sector in Scotland. But we put the condition in all of that that we would protect frontline staff, because that's how we deliver effectively public services. So the rationalisation that takes place there will be an orderly and incremental programme that we work through to essentially realise the efficiencies that are required in the public finances. In relation to the points on income tax, we've set out some clear commitments on income tax, that we have a fair and progressive system, the most progressive in the United Kingdom, and we'll keep it that way. But we also have to be mindful of the turbulent conditions in which we're operating in, and we have to be mindful of the effects of inflation and other factors on taxpayers. So those will be the factors that I will bear in mind as we work through our commitments, which are given in the manifesto, not to increase the number of bands or their rates over the lifetime of the Parliament. So that's an assurance that I can confidently give to the electorate in Scotland. Can I come to Kirsten Patterson from Holyrood? Kirsten.
Hi there. On the measure of a price cap on essential goods, you've set out quite clearly that you would consider that a public health measure. I'm reminded of minimum unit pricing on alcohol, which was also introduced as a public health measure. Its implementation was held up by a lengthy legal challenge. Have you consulted with industry on this measure, and how would you avoid a similar challenge?
Well, obviously, we have powers that we are entitled to exercise if we have a rational basis for so doing. And the degree of pressure there is now on the affordability of essential items that make up a nutritious diet, which is then a public health issue, is a question which I believe gives us the ability and the legitimacy to take forward that policy step. Now, obviously, that has to be the subject of consultation with all interested parties, because that's the process government has to go through on that. This is an election. We are setting out the things we're going to do, and we obviously have to consult fully and properly. There is, of course, also the additional dimension of the Internal Market Act of the United Kingdom, which is a relevant factor, which you'll be familiar with the view I have, that I don't support the Internal Market Act. I think it erodes the exercise of devolved powers. So I'm making it clear in the manifesto that the UK government has a dimension here that I want to make sure they do not use to undermine the exercise of our properly constituted public health powers. Now, the way this would work is that it would not control all prices in supermarkets. It would place an obligation on supermarkets, and principally larger supermarkets, to have an essential basket of items that individuals could reliably afford within the supermarket. So a loaf of bread at an affordable level, but there could be other loaves of bread that were more expensive than that loaf of bread. But fundamentally, it is about using our powers to protect the pursuit of a nutritious diet by members of the public, and a legitimate exercise of our powers. Can I come now to Dan Sanderson from the Times? Dan.
Thanks, First Minister. You just mentioned a loaf of bread, and you wanted to bring that to affordable levels. I was just looking at the Aldi website. You can get a loaf of bread for 55p. 15 eggs, £2.15, a kilo of rice, £1.39, 2 pints of milk, £1.20, a kilo of chicken wings, £2.15. I mean, aren't these items cheap already? And can you give us any specifics on how much lower you'd want them to be? So if a loaf of bread is 55p now, how much would it be if this system came in?
I think people are struggling to buy an adequate shop that they can that will support their families. Such as the pressure on individuals, they are having to pursue steps. I visited yesterday a food hub in Maybole, part of a wonderful community project, but people are using that because they are absolutely struggling to make ends meet. So what we would consult upon is a reasonable basis of ensuring there were in place a collection of items that would allow people to obtain a nutritious shopping that would allow them to provide for their families. And that's a legitimate exercise of the public health powers of the Scottish Government. Now, I'm not going to specify individual prices today. That's the subject to consultation and also about dialogue with individuals and with industry about the financial circumstances people and companies face. But that it is the exercise of that legitimate role to ensure that we have in place measures that support people who are struggling financially in our society. Can I come to Susanna Blair of EFE News? Susanna, yes.
Thanks, Minister. You said on Sunday that independence referendum could be held as soon as 2028. How realistic is that timeline in practice?
I think it's very realistic because I've set out to people in Scotland the proposition that I put, that if the SNP wins a majority, we should be able to take forward a referendum on independence. And the legislation is legislation with which we are familiar. It can be passed by the Scottish Parliament in proper order to enable that decision to be taken at that time. So I think the timescale is entirely realistic. Seven Carell on The Guardian. Sev.
Thank you, Mr Swinney. You've again raised this question about lowering energy prices, making that central to your campaign. But precisely how? You're not planning to do a Venezuela and nationalise oil and gas. Oil and gas prices and electricity prices are set internationally. Scotland, even after independence, would remain part of a European interconnected energy network. So how exactly would an independent Scotland or even a Scottish Government pre-independence stop energy prices from rising and control them?
Well, one of the issues that is within the control of the United Kingdom Government, or the policy arrangements are under the control of the United Kingdom Government, is about the setting of the price of electricity by the price of gas. And that's a choice. So there's just one example of how powers could be exercised in a different way, which the UK Government is not currently doing, to ensure that individuals are not facing the type of bills that they are facing for their energy costs. And their energy costs are astronomical at the present moment. So there is plenty of scope to exercise control. And of course the other issue is that Scotland is a country today that is producing more energy than we actually require. We're producing more renewable energy than we require. We're producing 2.5 times the gas that we require. And these are so the issues that we face are not a shortage of energy. The issues that we face are the costs that people are providing because of the way in which the market is organised. And that's what I want to fix. And I want to fix that by, well, I'm setting out to the UK Government what they could do tomorrow in the exercise of their power, but they've failed to do so. And I'm simply saying if the UK Government will not exercise those powers rationally on behalf of the people of Scotland, then make way for a Scottish Government that will. Can I come to Chris McCall from the Daily Record? Chris.
Hi, good morning, First Minister. Can I just ask again about your plan to introduce price caps on bread and milk? Can you be clear, will this apply only to supermarkets or will it also apply to small independent shops, like the kind of which there are many here in the East End of Glasgow? And what would you say to those many small shopkeepers who are already struggling to keep their businesses afloat in the face of supermarket competition, who will look at these proposals with alarm?
Well, the thinking behind it is to make sure that people have a reliable access point to affordable food supplies. And we will consult on all of the details, but my intention would be to apply this to supermarkets who can take the financial strain of that particular issue. So that's the focus of our policy intervention. And of course, what the Scottish Government does is we support smaller businesses with other interventions, such as the small business bonus, which will benefit significantly the businesses that you are referring to, where we put forward practical assistance to enable individuals and businesses to be able to thrive. But fundamentally, I have to address the issue that is causing such concern to members of the public, which is the affordability of their standard of living, an essential standard of living at this particular time. Can I come to Justin Bowie from DC Thomson? Justin.
Thanks, First Minister. During the campaign, many of our readers in your own Perth backyard have spoken about the sort of state of the city centre. They feel that, too many shops are closing, it's harder for businesses to run there. What does this manifesto and what will your government offer to voters in your sort of constituency and home area of Perth?
Well, obviously, in relation to the city centre, Perth city centre, like other city centres and town centres, faces challenges about the extent of the retail environment because patterns of shopping have changed. So what we have to do is to support city centres through regeneration activity, which is expressed within the manifesto, and also by supporting developments within cities that will enable more people to live in city centres through housing investment. And of course, you'll be familiar with the fact that the government is now operating the largest housing investment programme in the history of devolution, with over £900 million of investment allocated for this current financial year. So those are just two of the areas through regeneration and housing that we intend to support. A third is, of course, the measures that are in the budget to engage around the costs of business, particularly for the hospitality sector, which is one of the other provisions that we have in the manifesto. Can I come to Andrew Lermworth of the Herald? Andrew?
Thanks, First Minister. Can I ask about the basic income for artists? Do we have any number on how many people will be able to apply? In Ireland, there were 2,000 of those salaries available, but 9,000 people applied, so interested to know what the process will be. And secondly, Nigel Farage this morning has said it would be quite reasonable for another vote on Scottish independence for another referendum at some point in the future. Does that mean that your hopes of IndyRef 2 are better served by a Nigel Farage government rather than a Labour government?
Good try, Andrew. I think the best way to get an independence referendum is for the SNP to get a majority on the 7th of May, and that's what I'm doing. On the issue about the basic income from artists, obviously we'll engage with the cultural community. We've made so much progress and headway in our dialogue with the cultural community, and I want to make sure that the development of these proposals is in accordance with the aspirations and thinking of the artistic community. Obviously that will drive how many individuals can be supported, because it will determine how much support is available for each individual. But we will engage constructively to get the answers to those points, giving the in principle policy commitment in the manifesto. Can I come to Xander Elliards of the National? Xander.
Hi, good morning. The first thing on planning, you say you want to speed up planning, but often there's not some amorphous system holding it up. It's literally you and your ministers. The £40 million fish farm on Lot Long sat on your desks, report finished for 18 months. Will you set yourself a statutory time limit on how long these reports can sit on your desk before you have to make a decision? And on the supermarket pricing, I mean, there's a lot of questions there. I guess it's been tried in Hungary and Croatia. It's been tried in the UK in the 1970s. It seems to have led to really, really high inflation every single time. What's your response to that?
Okay, on the point about speeding up the planning process, those measures have got to apply to everybody. So that includes the government. So the government's got to be swift in its decision making. There's a number of improvements that were made on consenting regimes, and we have to make sure that's reflected in our decision making as well, should we be fortunate enough to be re-elected. In relation to supermarket pricing, what this is about making sure that we take the steps to intervene to protect families that are facing challenges and difficulties. And it is a measure which will, as I said in my earlier answer, it won't affect all prices. It will affect a limited number of prices to provide people with an appropriate opportunity to obtain nutritious food. So I don't envisage it having the effects that you have cited. Can I come to David Ball of the Scotsman?
Thank you, First Minister. On the price cap on essential goods, can I just get some clarity on whether you see this as a sort of temporary measure while inflation is high, or do you see it more as a permanent policy on a sort of public health grounds? And have you started discussions with the UK government about that?
Well, on let's just say, dialogue with the UK government is a little bit threadbare just now during an election campaign, if I can just put it as delicately as that. But should the public support us, we will embark on that right away. Of course we will. In relation to the characteristic of this proposal, it would have a sunset clause on it, so it would be time limited or limited by circumstances. So the point you raise about perhaps being determined by inflationary effects, then that is that would be a legitimate sunset clause to have in the proposal, and it would have to be driven by how you do a proposal like this is because you have a public health justification for so doing. So you have to be constantly confident that you have a public health basis for so acting, and therefore the sunset clause point with various conditions applied to it is the relevant point to consider there. Can I come to Simeon Kerr from the FT?
Thanks, First Minister. Regarding housing, you talk about a need to reform planning, but that's been an issue that's been hanging around for a long time. Your political rivals are coming up with targets in terms of new house building. They're talking about specifics about reforming MPF4 in terms of reintroducing a presumption in favour of house building. Surely voters who are worried about homelessness and worried about economic growth are going to look at your rivals' prospectuses and see that as giving more ambition for the future of Scotland. Thanks.
Well, I think what people will see is that, and if you look at the most recent data, this is all demonstrable, the level of consents and starts is rising significantly in Scotland, and that's a consequence of the changes that have been brought forward by Mary McCallan. And then the legislative changes that we've made in the housing bill enable that further, and that's all in the statute book. And then you've got the commitment to the More Homes Scotland agency, which is about cutting through so much of those barriers and obstacles that perhaps exist on individual projects. And then lastly, you've got the fact that the government has already put to Parliament and had agreed a budget that involves the largest investment in housing in the history of devolution of over £900 million. So I think that gives people confidence that the direction of travel under the SNP government is very robust. And I would also point out that over the lifetime of the SNP government, on average, we have constructed more affordable housing on average per year over the lifetime of our government than was the case in the preceding 8 years of the Labour and Liberal executive. I know it's a long time ago, but the data is still relevant, and we've actually built more houses per head of population than in that time. Can I come to Michael Blackley, Daily Mail? Michael.
Hello, thank you. Just on the price cap, first of all, I mean, it is a pretty huge intervention in the free market. So can you just be clear to voters, do you not believe in the principles of the free market? And on tax, you obviously broke the promise given 5 years ago to not raise rates and bands. So are there any conceivable circumstances whatsoever in which you would raise these in the next 5 years? And is there no desire whatsoever to close the tax gap between Scotland and the rest of the UK?
Okay, so three points in there, Michael. I do support the free market, but sometimes you have to intervene in markets to protect people, and that's what I'm simply doing here. I'm not, it's a limited intervention with a very focused purpose, which is driven by public health concerns that we have. Because if we don't do that, if people can't find a nutritious shop, then their health circumstances will deteriorate, and our health service will be dealing with the consequences of that. So it's actually an intervention for the well-being of individuals and also to protect the sustainability of our public services into the bargain. So that's the rationale for it. So I'm not proposing any kind of wider question. I am, for absolute clarity, a supporter of the free market. But where markets are not functioning in the right way, you sometimes have to intervene to act. On tax, you won't be surprised to hear, Michael, that I don't accept your characterisation of what's happened in the last 5 years. But there are, of course, I think in the real world, and I deal in the real world, there are economic circumstances that happen. In 2021, we did not know that there was going to be a massive inflation spike that came as a consequence of an illegal invasion of Ukraine. And that is what has had a huge effect on our public finances. And I've had to wrestle with the implications of that in the public finances. I did it as the acting finance minister in 22 and 23 to deal with the effect of that inflation spike. So these things happen, and we've got to be able to adjust and adapt towards that. And of course, the manifesto includes the commitment that the majority of income taxpayers continue to pay less tax than if they lived in the rest of the United Kingdom. And that's what the position is at this time, and that's what we'll continue in the period to come. Now, can I come to Stuart Patterson from the Glasgow Times? Stuart.
Thank you. Can I ask about your £2 bus fare cap? How far would you be able to travel for £2? How much will this policy cost the Scottish Government? Have you spoken to the bus operators? And does this require public ownership or franchising of buses?
It doesn't require franchising and public ownership, but obviously we are supportive of these concepts and have put in place powers to enable that to be the case. There's costings being made available of what we estimate to be the costs, and in relation to the fare cap, it would be for a particular journey. So it's in relation to some of the costs that I set out as to what would one individual journey cost in this context rather than the current context as to how it would be applied. Can I come to Andrew MacDonald from Politico?
Apologies if I've missed it, because we only had about 10 minutes or so to go through the manifesto before you stood up. But I can't find any language in there on your policy on a presumption against new oil and gas projects in the North Sea. Is that confirmation that that policy has been dropped, and will you now say whether you support the approval of the new oil and gas fields at Jackdaw and Rosebank? And a quick second one, if I can. Have you made such a big deal out of the Lord Offord and Anna Sarwar scuffle the other night because you're actually nervous that they might deprive you of a majority?
Well, on that point, I'd simply point out that I was an observer of the scuffle. And I think the best way to deal with that particular issue is to elect a majority of SNP MSPs, because that will lock reform out of our politics. In relation to the question of new oil and gas developments, I've set out quite comprehensively during the election campaign the position of the SNP that if any new developments are to be contemplated, they have to go through a climate compatibility assessment. That has to determine the impact of the whole exercise of any developments in comparison to the ongoing use of oil and gas, which we're obviously going to be dealing with in the period that lies ahead, even though we are making our journey to net zero. And then we also, in the process, have to take into account questions in relation to security of energy supply. So these are the rational considerations that have to go into any consideration of these particular issues. Can I come to Simon Johnson now from The Telegraph? Simon.
Thank you, First Minister. My dad worked for the Milk Marketing Board for 30 years, so for my sins, I have an idea of how this works. And if you're cutting the price of things like milk, butter and cheese, then the obvious danger is the supermarkets are just going to cut what they give to farmers. Yeah. I know that your manifesto says you'll monitor this, but there is a clear danger from doing this that you will put farmers out of business. And just following up on Chris's question, if the price cap applies in supermarkets but not in small corner shops, isn't the danger that more people choose to shop in supermarkets and therefore the corner shops go out of business? Thanks.
On your first point, there is, and we acknowledge in the manifesto text the issue that relates to the relationship between supermarkets and farmers, and we obviously work very hard to try to protect the interests of the farming community. Yesterday I was discussing many of these issues on a visit to a farmer in the Kilmarnock area, so I'm obviously representing rural Scotland for the last 29 years. I'm very, very familiar with these questions. So as part of devising this approach, we have to ensure that those consequences are not foreseen, and that's exactly what we will do. I would point out, of course, in the current environment, it's quite a hard job for farmers to be protected from supermarkets acting on their own within the free market, as one of your colleagues was asking me about. So it's a live issue, and we have to design a scheme and an approach which takes that into account. And in relation to smaller businesses, I suppose what I said to Chris McCall is relevant here, that we are acting to support smaller businesses, to support their sustainability. And this is just one question which would be pursued at the margins of the activity of the retail sector. Can I come to Mark McLaughlin from The Sun?
Good morning. You opened your speech saying, friends, I keep my promises. From previous manifestos, free school meals for primary pupils, free laptop for every child, free bikes, 3,500 more teachers, scrap the council tax, primary school sizes of 18, increase NHS activity above pre-pandemic levels. What happened to those promises, and why should Scots believe these promises?
Well, I think some of your government involves you confronting some changing circumstances that you face. So let's take a couple of the things you mentioned. The abolition of the council tax. I'm afraid Parliament wasn't prepared to support that. And we live in a democracy, and if Parliament's not prepared to go along with our proposals, it is difficult for us to enact those proposals. It's not difficult, it's impossible to enact those proposals. And then when it comes to some of the issues around the financing of the last Parliament was turned on its head by the implications of the COVID pandemic, followed by the inflation spike that took place after the war in Ukraine. Now, inflation generally, like for most of the last, 40 years or so, inflation has been a relatively benign factor in our society. And in 2022 and 2023, it became a punishingly disruptive factor within our public finances. And that is what makes things challenging. But some of the examples that I cited, so last May I stood in front of Parliament and said I'd abolished peak rail fares, and by September I'd abolished peak rail fares. We said that we would expand early learning and childcare from the miserly 412 hours that we inherited from the Labour Liberal Executive in 2007 to 1,140, and we've done that. So I think people can be confident that I deliver on my promises. David Walker from the Express. David.
Morning, First Minister. On your price cap on essential goods, in 2023 your Westminster leader asked UK government to do this, but if you've had the powers to do this for 3 years, why have you not acted till now? And secondly, on independence, you still haven't set out exactly how you're going to get a referendum. If UK government say no, which is likely to happen, West Streeton will say no, Stamford will say no, so how will you actually get a referendum? Okay, well, on the question of the price cap, I'm setting out our proposals now in the context that we're operating in, and I judge the evidence base exists for us to be able to take forward that power, exercising our public health powers. And we've got to have the justification for doing that and the evidence to do that, and I believe that we now have the basis for doing that. And on the question of the referendum, I set this out very openly. I set it out at the beginning of my speech. I set it out very openly in the manifesto, that the people of Scotland have a right to decide their own constitutional future. This is a voluntary union. It was even the Channel 4 debate on Tuesday night. Anna Sawar said that we live in a voluntary union. I heard him. He was standing right beside me, and that is a fundamental point in this discussion. And in 2011, it was accepted when the SNP won a majority. Scotland got a referendum, and that's exactly the precedent I want to rely upon. Right, the last question in this session is going to be from Isla Barker of Broadcasting Scotland. Isla.
Hello. So I just wanted to ask what lessons could the SNP learn from the Hungarian election on keeping the far right out of power in this upcoming election?
I think the key lesson is that you've got to stand up to the far right openly, strongly, setting out your values, saying how you take how you apply your values to all of your decisions. And my values are for a tolerant, inclusive, welcoming Scotland. That's the antithesis of what reform and the far right represent in Scotland. And I make it abundantly clear today that under no circumstances will I engage in any cooperation or collaboration with reform in any way, shape or form in the next Parliament. And I think it would be a good thing if other people were much clearer on that question.